How's it going, everyone? My name is True Wonder Dog, and today I wanted to explain every new mechanic in MK11, from short hops to crushing blows and everything in between. And there's honestly a ton of stuff to cover here because MK11 basically is an entirely new game when compared to MKX or even MK9. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, starting with movement. Now, there is no running in MK11, but the movement itself forward and backwards is fairly fast, and of course you can dash forward and backdash as well. However, you cannot cancel the dash into a block immediately, so you can't forward dash and block immediately, and you can't backdash and then block immediately. You do have to commit to that movement a little bit, so be a bit wary of that when playing the game. You can't just forward dash right in the opponent's face. That does leave you open for a short period of time. So just make sure to be responsible when doing that, don't get too cheeky. And while not being able to run does seem a bit limiting, I do think it makes teleports feel that much more important in this game, especially teleports that don't lead to an attack like Scarlet's or Raiden's where they just end up behind you. I think they're a lot more useful now because the running isn't there. And not to mention the footsie game also improves a bit because you have to actually be more mindful of your spacing and how far your attacks actually reach. And aside from basic movement, one of the newest additions to MK11 was short hops. Now, unlike in some games like King of Fighters, you can't actually short hop forward and backwards, but you can short hop in the neutral, just straight up and down. However, the attacks you do on the way down are very limited, so you can't do any jumping attack on the way down, but you do have unique attacks that can only be done from a short hop. So for example, with Scarlet, I could neutral jump and then press a punch on the way down to do a fast overhead attack that would knock the opponent down. And from what the developers were telling us on stage, short hops are mostly good for countering command grabs and other throws, because the opponent can't throw you when you're airborne and you knock them down for some good pressure. You can dash on them and then pressure them as they're trying to get up. And that's basically it for the movement, although I do want to mention how zoomed in the camera is in this game, and as a result, when you jump, you sometimes actually go over the health bars themselves, and it kind of makes it a bit difficult to see what the opponent's doing, though I imagine we'll all adapt to that in time. I just wanted to mention it because it was kind of funny to see how the camera was so close, and when the person jumped, the camera didn't really shoot into the sky to follow them. Instead, the opponent would just go over the health bars, and only their feet and shins would be visible on screen. Now, thankfully, you can't do very many creative things from the air. You can just do a jumping kick, or a jumping punch, and some characters like Garrus have a body splash attack which can cross up, but aside from that, the opponent can't do anything too creative from the air, so it's okay for them to be a bit off screen like that. I just wanted to take note of it. So next up, let's talk about the meter system, because this is very different from any other Mortal Kombat game, and honestly it's very different from any other fighting game that I've played. So for starters, the player is given 2 bars for offense and 2 bars for defense, and from the very start of the match, both these meters are filled. So first up, let's talk about the offensive meter. So the offensive meter is used for enhancing attacks. However, the way you enhance moves is not the same as Injustice or MKX. It's not always the block button that's used to enhance the attack. So for example, with Sonya, I would do her leg sweep, and then to enhance it for 1 bar, I would actually press down and the throw button. That was how you actually extended that move, and that's true for every character in the game from what I saw. To extend the attack with meter is actually a unique input. It's not going to be a universal block button anymore. So you actually do have to take more time in practice mode to learn what every single extension is, because every attack is different. Another good example would be Baraka, where he has the slicey move where he just stabs you over and over again. If you simply keep mashing X, then he will spend 1 bar to do more damage, and then if you keep mashing it still, he will spend 2 bars on that same attack to do even more damage. Now, it's not an absurd amount of damage, so it's not worth the 2 bars unless it kills the opponent, but that's just one more example of how you can just press a single button to extend the damage for a single special move, and it's unique to Baraka. So next up, let's talk about the defensive meter. Now, the defense meter is actually a lot more complicated and a bit tougher to explain, but basically it's used for escaping the opponent's pressure, whether it be for wake-ups, or for escaping combos, or even using interactables. Little small things like that can be done with the defensive meter, so let's talk about each one a bit more in depth. So first up, we have the wake-ups. Now, I wasn't actually able to use any of this myself, but I did see some pro players doing it, where they would wake up with an invincible attack that would counter whatever the opponent was doing, and it did cost them 1 bar of their defense meter. So it's very similar to Street Fighter V in that way, where a wake up will cost you some meter, so if the opponent has no defensive meter at all, you can feel free to pressure them on wake up because their options are very limited. Now, if you want to spend 2 bars of meter, you can actually do a flip out to escape combos similar to Injustice 2. Once again, I didn't really find much footage of this, but Maximilian was telling me about it in depth, and it is a good way to escape combos. However, it can only be done when you're in the air. So if the opponent resets you to the ground or is just doing a grounded combo, you cannot use the air escape, even if you do have 2 bars. The opponent has to do a flashier combo that puts you in the air. And even then, you gotta be careful of when you choose to escape, because like you've probably seen in Injustice 2, a player will actually escape the combo only to fall back into another attack because they didn't pick the proper time to escape. So even though it does cost 2 bars, which is a lot of resources, you have to be very smart when using it because it's not a guaranteed escape. Unlike combo breakers in MKX and MK9, which are gone from this game, there are no more universal combo breakers. And then last but not least, you can use the defensive meter on interactables on the stage. And what makes the offense and defense meter so bizarre is that they actually refill over time. They don't build from landing combos or from taking damage yourself like in every other fighting game. Instead, they're just on a timer. So if you spend 1 bar of your offense meter, it rebuilds somewhat quickly. If you spend 2 bars of your offense meter, it takes a bit longer to refill. Not just because it's 2 bars, but the rate at which each bar fills is actually slower now. Now for the defense meter, it seemed to always rebuild at the same rate no matter what. So if you spend 2 bars, it rebuilds at a steady rate. If you spend 1 bar, it rebuilds at a steady rate. Let's go ahead and talk about Flawless Guard real quick. So a Flawless Guard is like a parry in Third Strike, or in Street Fighter V, some characters have a parry. But basically, you can press the block button within about 3 frames of the attack landing, and when you do, you recover much faster from the attack, which means you can punish moves that would normally be safe. However, you can't just do a combo straight out of it. Instead, you have limited responses, much like the short hop. So for example, Sonya had a quick back handspring she did, which launched the opponent, and that allowed for a short follow-up combo. And she likely has more attacks than just that. She can probably do a kick as well. In fact, there might actually be 4 different options from a Flawless Guard. 2 punch options and 2 kick options, but I didn't have enough time to really experiment on that, and from what I heard a lot of players saying, it's actually quite difficult to pull off the Flawless Guard. But I imagine with enough practice it's going to become a very useful tool, especially against players who like to abuse safe strings over and over again and think they can just get away with it. This will make sure they can't actually do that if you have enough skill to time the Flawless Guard. It's definitely a tough new mechanic to use, but it does sound very useful in a high level match. And last but not least, let's talk about the Fatal Blow, because that also is technically meter based. So this is your new super attack that can only be done once a match. So if you do land it, whether it be during a combo or simply raw to punish your opponent, it can't be used for the entire match afterwards, not just once per round, but once per match. That's pretty crazy to think about. Now this move actually becomes available when your health bar drops below 30%. And this attack as a result does crazy high damage and it barely scales during a combo, which means if you do a 10-hit combo and then end with Fatal Blow, it still does a crazy amount of damage. This thing can easily do 50% damage in a combo, if not 60 and almost 70%. It's pretty crazy how much damage it can actually do. However, once again, it can only be done once a match. However, that's only if you land it, so don't be too concerned. If you do manage to miss it, or if the opponent blocks it, it actually does refill over time, and it refills fairly quickly too. It wasn't uncommon when I was playing Wooly that he would do the Fatal Blow, I would block it, and then I'd try to attack him and he'd keep playing defensively, and then he'd use it a second time to actually still get the win. It refills a lot faster than you'd think it would. Now oddly enough, I'm not quite sure if every Fatal Blow is armored, or if it's only armored on like frame 3 and not immediately on startup. I'm not sure about that because there were times when I would just beat it out clean by attacking it, and then there were other times where it would armor through one of my moves. Now they are very fast, so you don't really need the armor. If every character doesn't get the armor, you don't really need it. It's a very fast attack, and that makes it very easy to combo into as well. It's just an all-around useful move, which does explain why it's only available once a match. So next up, let's talk about the newest and most interesting mechanic in my opinion, and that's the Crushing Blows. Now these look very similar to X-ray attacks, but they actually work entirely different. So these moves do not rely on meter at all. Instead, they activate when certain criteria are met. So if you've played Soul Calibur 6, they're very similar to lethal hits in that regard. So basically, in order for a Crushing Blow to activate, you need to meet certain criteria. So here's a good example. Scarlet has a back 1-2 attack, and if you land that attack on counter hit, then you get the Crushing Blow. And that's true for a lot of Crushing Blows. A lot of them activate on counter hit, and another good example that I think is universal is that if you duck under an attack and then land an uppercut, you get a Crushing Blow there as well. And Crushing Blows are very interesting because they add something new to your strings. So the most obvious thing is damage. You always get a damage increase, although sometimes it can be a damage over time, like with Scorpion. He won't do as much damage initially upon landing it, but then when your character falls down, you'll notice their health bar continues to drain because they're taking bleed damage over time, and that's very interesting. However, even more interesting is sometimes crushing blows will launch the opponent a bit higher into the air, allowing you to extend combos where you normally couldn't, and a very good example of this is the uppercut. Normally an uppercut can't be comboed after, especially if the opponent's on the ground. However, if it's a crushing blow, you can easily follow it up as long as your attack has enough range. And they almost always do, you just have to learn which attack strings have better range to reach the opponent. Some crushing blows even allow the attack string to be special cancelled, where normally it couldn't. So a good example of this is Scorpion. Normally he can't cancel one of his kick strings into his chain. However, if you land the crushing blow, he actually can, and now you have a new combo possibility, which is very, very cool. And while crushing blows do seem very powerful, keep in mind you can only do one crushing blow per attack in each match. So for example, if I land Scarlet's back 1-2, which is very easy, it only requires a counter hit. However, after I land that, I will no longer get a crushing blow from that attack for the rest of the match. So in other words, I can't just keep doing back 1-2 to keep getting crushing blows. Once I've landed it, it's gone. However, there actually is an option in the controller settings which allows you to perform a crushing blow only if you hold down the button. And this allows you to save it for later on when you think it would be more crucial. Whether it's to end a combo or just to end the round because it does so much damage, you can now ensure that you only do the crushing blow when you hold down the button, and that way you never get it by mistake. And I'm very fascinated to see how high level players actually use that feature, because for me personally, I was just taking every crushing blow I could get because I didn't know what necessarily caused it. However, I will say that a character like Baraka has some of the easiest and most obvious crushing blows in the game, and it makes him a very good beginner character because nearly every move I was landing, whether it be for a punish or for a counter hit, was causing a crushing blow and doing a ton of damage for just one attack string. I do think that crushing blows are the most important change to MK11, and you want to learn every single one for any character you intend to main because they're very, very crucial. And then last but certainly not least, let's talk about the variations. Now the game gave us 3 variations to use by default, and each variation added new special moves and attack strings. However, you could also create your own unique playstyle by mixing and matching attacks in your own variation. So in other words, the game gave you a limited number of special moves and attack strings to suit your playstyle that you could assign to that one variation. Now I'm not sure if this will actually be allowed at tournaments or not, but at the very least it sounds like a lot of fun online, even if it is limited to certain modes. Because being allowed to customize your own character with your favorite moves just sounds like a ton of fun to me. But to summarize, the game gives you 3 variations by default, each one has unique moves and special moves. However, you can also create your own unique variation by using a limited number of special moves and attack strings to make your own playstyle. And that's basically about it for all the changes, everyone, aside from the obvious things like brutalities, fatalities, and other things like that returning. Now I'm sorry if I missed anything in this video, I only did have a limited amount of time to play the game, and the reveal itself didn't last for super long, though I did my best to try and analyze and research every match that I saw. So if you did in fact enjoy the video, please leave a like down below, it really does help my channel out a ton. And while you're down there, why not keep that combo going by subscribing and ringing that bell? That way you never miss a future video. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.